Sharing our stories connects us. Listen and be connected. Join us for the conversation meeting weekly at the intersection of community and culture. Hosted by Mario Nunez and Joe King Carter. And Joe King Carter. I love the way that sounds. How you doing, Joe?
I'm doing great, baby. How are you?
It is Wednesday. It is hump day. And if it's Wednesday at noon, you know you've got to be listening to The Conversation, meeting weekly at the intersection of community and culture. Can we drill down a little bit? What does that mean exactly to those people that are new to our little enterprise here on Wednesdays?
Well, you know, WMNF Tampa, Florida has all of these amazing public affairs shows, and they provide all kinds of incredible information. We're here to do something a little different and talk about culture and personal narratives and get to know people a little more. And in that process, I believe that we will find that there is a connection between all of us when you find out what somebody else's story is about. It's not unlike your story. And so that's sort of where we want to go with this show.
It's really hard to dislike somebody that you know well enough. You know, what did they always used to say? You know, it's hard to take somebody out. It's hard to really do harm to somebody. If you don't know them, it's not a problem, right? And that's what's been happening, I think, culturally speaking. We've been desensitized. Now, we've been othered.
Yeah, certainly. And we've been othered. Yes, I love that word in this use. This is the first thing that fascists do is they turn human beings into something else.
Into things.
Yeah. And we need to get back to turning people into people.
So you had a good week, this week off?
I had a wonderful week.
Let me tell you that besides the heat, and the heat is here, and it's here to stay until probably September, and the storms that are already brewing in the Caribbean. But today is a special day in my family because my granddaughter, Penelope, turns 2.
Wow.
2 years ago today, she burst on the scene.
Wow.
And the good news about that, the best news about that is that just like everything else, man, you know, renewal, you know, a new opportunity.
Sure.
You look into a baby's eyes, you know, you get an opportunity to feel young again for
part of the cycle.
It is part of the cycle.
And it's a beautiful thing.
And so I wanted to say happy birthday, Penny.
And what will she call you upon your instruction?
Oh, that's wonderful. Wonderful that you should ask. I think abuelo. In keeping with the traditions of my Latino culture, abuelo, you know. I never thought I would be an abuelo for a long time.
Not Grampy.
Or Gramps, or
Papa,
or you know, there's a lot. I mean, and you know, maybe we can ask our listeners to call in and to send
suggestions
us
for Mario's.
That's right.
Name for his granddaughter to refer to him,
or maybe what they call their grandfather.
Yeah,
you know, let me give you the number right quick. If you don't know it, you should know it. It should be on your speed dial. It's 813-239-9663. Send us a text 813-433-0885. Emails, dj@wmnf.org, and we are standing by to take calls and emails. And of course, the 4th of July is tomorrow.
Yes.
So what does that mean?
Stay away from processed meats.
Yes. Continue. Continue.
Yes, it means that we are.
Are you talking about frankfurters and hot dogs? Because Joey Chestnut's giving it all up, man. He's not eating hot dogs anymore.
Yeah. Well,
so I don't know what they're going to do.
I don't eat them. Yeah. So,
Nathan's.
Yeah.
Coney Island.
Some things need to go.
Yeah, that's one of them. And I think the other thing too is, you know, there's only 3 days a year that you can legally disperse, shoot fireworks, and that's the 4th of July, that's New Year's Eve and New Year's Day.
Correct.
So those are the 3 days that you can legally do them. But I tell you what, I feel bad every time this year and at New Year's as well for those feral animals that are living outside.
Not just the ferals.
And the ones that we keep inside our homes that we love too, because they don't understand. They don't understand. And it's a little bit nerve-wracking because can you imagine that's what it must be like in a war zone?
It's terrible.
Only things are blowing up around.
It's very difficult on our animal cousins, no doubt about it.
Well, we're off and running now. Now we've got it going. So we do have a guest today in studio with us. I know you guys are thinking, why are they ramble on?
Yes.
Because our guest is
Let's get to the good stuff.
He's taking pictures of us while we're talking, and that's and there's a conduit there. There's a theme because our guest today is an exquisite and professional photographer, among other things. He wears many hats. I'm going to let Joe introduce him to us. I know him well. You've heard his voice here on WMNF before, Joe. Who do we have in studio today?
Well, our esteemed guest today is Chip Weiner, and I think many in the community probably already know, Chip, but I have a burning question. And that burning question is burning for me and Mario both.
Burn,
and it is
baby.
this. In the Deep South, if you have a first name
Yes.
that is not the name that is considered traditional,
Yes.
somebody will say to you, that's not the name your mama gave you.
Yes.
What is the origin of Chip?
Well, first of all, I was born in Greenville, South Carolina, so I am from the South,
All
my
right
friend.
now. All right now.
We're all good. My father's my name is Eugene Dale Weiner. That is my legal name. So
EDW.
EDW is exactly right. And I think, I mean, the story that I got from my parents was that I'm the third Eugene, and that my father, when he was a boy, everyone called him Genie, and he really didn't like it.
We can see why.
Yep.
Yeah. So my parents decided to give me the nickname of Chip. But imagine this. So we moved to Tampa when I was in the third grade. Mm-hmm. So here comes this kid from South Carolina, and I talk like this. I mean,
I bet you did. I bet you did.
And I talk slow.
How y'all doing?
Yeah, how y'all?
How y'all?
So I go to Gorey Elementary School with a Southern accent with the name Chip Weiner. How do you think my life looked?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just realizing you took it on the chin, so to speak. Chin a lot, didn't you?
I was mean for a while, yeah. I got in a few fights, but, that's the way we rocked back then.
Kids being kids, boys being boys.
It can grow character in a way.
Exactly.
So, Chip...
Don't call me Genie.
My thinking was he would chip off the old block. That's what I was thinking.
And the truth of the matter is, I am the spitting image of my father.
Then it could apply. Chip off the old block could absolutely apply.
Right.
Yeah, okay. So that's very different than I thought it was going to be, because I had a feeling it was Charles, just Chip and Charles.
A lot of times that's
Charles
true.
Chip. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Now, you happen to be a guest today that I realized this morning, you sit at the intersection of everything that we are interested in doing here, because Mario and I believe our audience and the community are very interested in cultural events and cultural affairs, cultural concepts. We're interested in art. We're interested in history. And you sit right firmly in that vortex, don't you?
I do.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about your early life in Tampa and what that was like for you.
Okay. As I think we've mentioned here before, I was a Gorey Wilson plant kid, so South Tampa.
Pedigree.
Or not. I was not.
We know that. That story's coming. That story's coming.
Not in the popular crowd at all. I was, when I was in high school, I was a long hair musician. I played drums in the jazz band and then picked up guitar and played that afterwards. But, no complaints. Living in South Tampa, it really is just this polished life, depending on how you look at it. I don't care if you're a popular kid or not.
Right.
You were a Davis Islander.
I was a Davis Islander.
There you go.
And fell in love with our city.
So essentially grew up on the island?
Essentially, I moved in when I was in high school because of family turmoil, but I essentially grew up on Davis Island.
Wow.
And again, charmed life over there.
Sure.
We were safe. We rode our bicycles everywhere.
Beautiful streets.
Beautiful streets. We probably caused a little trouble over there. Nothing that I'll disclose right now, but it was a charmed life.
You weren't stealing cars, were you?
That depends on.
Hey, he said we can ask him anything, didn't he?
That's right. Yeah. Bring it, he said. Bring it.
Bring it.
Okay.
Well, probably nothing more than a parental car. But
okay. All right.
We sold our dad's car out of the driveway.
Well, that's kind of interesting because one would not know this by looking at me today, but I used to be a addicted cyclist, and my favorite place to ride was on the island.
Yeah.
Was on Davis Island, and all the way out to Peter O'Knight and the yacht club and back. And that's interesting that you grew up there because it's a little bit otherworldly there. I mean, you're sort of in Tampa, but you're not in Tampa.
There
Island
is
folks.
that divide.
Island folks.
Yeah.
There is that divide. But these days, people have this idea, and it's a beautiful place, and it's sort of separate because it's across a bridge to get there. But back in the day, I won't break into all of it, but I've done some studying, like with other people that lived there, and maybe we'll talk about the Gandy collection. Maybe we won't, as far as upcoming projects. But he talks about, and I certainly witnessed it on Davis Island. We were right across the canal from the phosphate mines and downwind from the water treatment plant. So consistently covered and dusted by phosphate dust. And back in the day, I don't think it's still true, as you walked around the island at night and you threw a rock into the water, you could actually see it glow because there was so much phosphorescence in the water, and you could see fish swim by.
Wow.
But still, outside of the environmental stuff, definitely a charmed life.
Tampa was a much different experience.
Much different
back then. Much smaller population center.
Right.
And Davis Island always housed Tampa General Hospital, so TGH was always there. I think really and truthfully, for those of us that didn't live on the island, didn't have that experience, there was this mystique about it. Yeah. There was this thing that you know you didn't really go on the island unless you had to.
It has canals.
Yeah, I know.
It has canals, and it also has a significant amount. It did at one time of sort of Med-Rev architecture out there too. So it always felt to me like
explain Med-Rev for those people that might not know.
Mediterranean revival architecture.
I love it. Let's ring a bell on Med-Rev.
There we go. We all know it.
Well, it's
we know it and we love it.
And again, it was fertile ground for the Burger brothers when they went in there with their cameras and they recorded Davis Island more than most other parts of Tampa. Chip is an authority. We can certainly.
You're segueing a little early.
That's what we do here.
Yeah.
Baby.
Okay.
No. But we're going to come back. We're going to come back around to Mr.
We're going to talk about the Burgett brothers.
D.P. Davis, when he developed Davis Island, really gave it this Venetian feel, because I've seen the old brochures, and part of the canals were that he wanted to sort of replicate at some level the Venetian experience. And so that's why they have those Mediterranean buildings, and all of his hotels and all the commercial buildings over there were indeed Mediterranean revival, because he was trying to create this whole thing on Davis Island. Pretty cool.
Siblings?
Very cool.
Siblings, Chip? Siblings?
I have a biological sister who lives in California, and stepsisters who are sort of spread out.
Okay, so you hit high school, and you're coming out of high school, and you're kind of this long-haired guy who's into music, and then what happens?
USF, and 4 years there, graduated from there with a minor in business, major in communication. Went into corporate America, into a family business, and worked that for a while, and it was interesting, and I hated it. Really did not like it at all. And at that same time, I was volunteering for the 13th Judicial Circuit as a juvenile arbitrator, which I won't go into detail, but bottom line is it was a diversionary program for juveniles who got into trouble. And I got this insight into families and the dysfunction in them. And, you know, I would sit in court, and a father would come walking in with their son. And, you know, clearly he had been drinking, and he would say, I don't know what's wrong with this effing kid. And, you know, I sit back and say, oh, well, I wonder what could be wrong with this effing kid as you look at some of that. So it really piqued an interest in family dynamics and psychiatry and psychology for me. And so ended up going to grad school, getting my graduate degree, a Master's of Science degree in counseling psychology. Came out of that, and I've worked in several places, including Tampa General Psychiatry Center when it was open, and it's taken me around the world. It allowed me to be involved with the federal government, where I traveled the world. I was in the Defense Intelligence Agency. That's what I'll put with it, and that led me to that. So it's just been a fascinating venture on the clinical side of stuff. Still have a private practice here in South Tampa. Do a lot of marriage counseling, because there's a lot of that happening all over the place, I think. And so that's kind of that end of things.
So how long have you been in?
Joe, ask him if he saw goats, or he talked to goats, or you know that movie that with George Clooney, where
remote viewing?
Yeah, ask him about that. I mean, he said he worked with the government. It was I don't know what kind of study.
I see.
Yeah.
You did say that
everything was on the table.
Everything's on the table. What can you share anything of what you did with the government? How about that?
I was a psychologist for the Defense Department, and I was considered an intelligence officer there, and I worked with both military and civilian employees there at a psychological level.
Okay.
That's fascinating.
It was fascinating.
What a learning experience for you.
for me, I also got to see behind the scenes, and I've said this frequently. I think if the majority of us had any idea what we do to protect this country behind the scenes, we would all shut our dang mouths and say thank you and praise the people who put their lives on the line every single day that you will never see. They are not necessarily in uniform.
Right.
They are behind the scenes. They are and they are working it. And to be able to see how we do all of that, because I went in as a civilian, and so I was gobsmacked with some of the technology and some of the things that we do. And I tell you, I just thank the Almighty that we have that sort of stuff available to us.
60 Minutes just let us have a little sneak peek on that. I believe it was 60 Minutes rather than the CBS morning show on Sundays. They dovetail the morning and the evenings. But there was a battleship that just returned from the Red Sea, that they were out there doing some defense work, sending some anti-ballistic missiles out to take out some of the stuff that was happening in the conflict between Gaza and Israel. And these were young adults. I don't want to say kids, but these were people in their 20s,
right,
maybe early 30s,
right,
that were doing some pretty heavy work where, you've got seconds to make a decision. Is that a commercial aircraft?
Right.
Or is that a missile that's, has a war?
I don't want to get stuck on this, but I will say again, think of what it takes to gather intelligence. Mm-hmm. Because the bad guys they're at it 24/7.
Right.
And so some of the folks, they have to watch the videos of things that are horrific on a daily basis. And I'm not saying it's being on the battlefield is easy at all, because I don't believe it. And watching your buddies get killed, what a just horrifically bad experience that's got to be. And I certainly believe in the idea about PTSD related to that.
100%.
But the unspoken heroes, those people behind the closed walls in the bunkers somewhere, both on United States soil as well as in the foreign places, which I had the opportunity to visit. Daily, they are barraged with that, and their safety is under threat every single day. Yeah, I'll leave it alone, but oh my gosh, I am so grateful.
CENTCOM right here at McDill?
Yeah. I would say that probably in some ways, every aspect of life, there's trauma around us all the time. We all absorb some minor levels of trauma. But what you saw is the kind of trauma that is at the very extreme end. I mean, at the very tip of the extreme end. Right. I can't imagine.
The thing is with most of us, I think, that if we experience trauma, we can talk about it. We can go and get some therapy. We can seek out some professional help. But the majority of those people who have a security clearance, they don't have the ability. Well, let me go to the neighborhood guy and let me talk about some of this, because unless there's a security clearance with that person,
right,
you can kind of talk in generic terms, but you certainly can't open the whole box and take a look at. Okay, let's leave that alone. But you get the idea. It was just what a fantastic trip.
I appreciate that you have stuff in your head that we can only appreciate from a distance. Yeah, I'll say it like that. Now you deal mostly with the warfare of marriage.
That's correct.
Nice. Well done there, sir. Well done.
And how long have you been in private practice?
30 years.
30 years?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So let's talk about you as a person who became a photographer, and we're going to go down a long path there. So how did that first start?
I think when I graduated from high school, I was given a film camera, and I played with it a little bit and shot some photos and stuff. And then I decided, I think I took a class or something at USF in continuing education. And again, talking about composition, et cetera, et cetera. And then I went into the darkroom. And for the first time, I developed film, and I exposed it on paper, and I put it in that pan of chemistry. Mm-hmm. And I shook that pan of chemistry around a little bit, and all of a sudden this image appeared. And, it's really kind of the standard story of old film photographers, how they fell in love. Mm-hmm. But that was it. That just sparked this interest that has been an obsession ever since. I love it. That sort of turned into as the digital age rolled around, a buddy of mine owned a gymnasium, and he trained bodybuilders. He said, "Hey, can you take photos of some of my guys?" I'm like, sure. So I got into some of the commercial in there. Then those guys said, "Listen, I got a girlfriend. She's a model. Can you do this?" And so that whole sort of thing blew up. And really, again, it was about experience building.
Right.
From that point, I've ridden a motorcycle for 30 years. And I saw a blurb on the internet at some point that a biker magazine was looking for an editor. And I just wrote the guy an email, "Listen, if you need a photographer, because I know that biker world, just let me know." He emailed me that same day, "We got an event tonight. Can you show up?" And just being able to get into the biker world, because there are some freaky, funny, awesome people at biker events.
Of course.
And everyone gets freaked
It's a
out
whole
by
different subculture.
by Hell's Angels and all that, and they are a part of it. But what a wonderful group of people to go and photograph and have fun. And so that sort of really built my chops in working with people in specific situations and delivering every week, some photographs that they needed for the magazine. And from there, I morphed into working for the Creative Loafing newspaper, where I became a photojournalist. And from that, it sort of turned into a food photographer, as well as doing some of the photojournalism. And from that, my career just continued to develop. And now it's commercial food photography and food blogger and all of that other stuff.
Which is some of the most incredible photography because it's the difficulty involved and the proper lighting and the timing.
Right.
And you get a small window to make that food look as amazing as it could possibly look.
Right.
Talk to us a little bit about how difficult that is, just the ins and outs.
I think one of the keys here and one of the mistakes I see people make is, it does have to do with lighting and specific content. But as I look at some of my old photography back from 2011 and 2012, I'm like, okay, well, I get it. I get where they're coming from. Most people are doing it with their phones these days. But I think with anything, look, I think if people put the time and effort into it and they let their obsessive thinking turn into something productive, I think you'll get to where you're going. On my website, I've got stuff that, how to improve your food photography. There's like 10 pages of, if you want to be a better food photographer, go and look at some of that stuff. And it has to do with lighting and content and composition. And one of the keys is don't be lazy. Get up off your butt from the table, find the right angle for taking that shot, and on and on and on. So it still is an absolute obsession with me, not only the food, but all of the other historical stuff.
And in the digital world today that we're working in, you don't have to necessarily wait to have your pictures developed.
Right.
You're not going to Eckerd Drugs and waiting a week.
Right. Well,
am I dating myself?
Yeah. Here's the thing: is that I have. What Chip's causing me to think about is that I have many friends who are professional photographers. Many. I have a good handful. I'm an artist, and I have a tremendous appreciation of photographers as artists because because I think sometimes people kind of think it's been highly diluted by the fact that everybody can take a picture on their phone. The analogy I would use for that is everybody can write words on a paper. Not everybody's a writer.
Correct.
Okay, so what Chip has experienced, and by the way, I was smiling when you were saying this because I took Photo 101 and 100 and 101 in college, and I went into the dark room, and I think that's a divider right there in those days. What would happen is when you put your paper in that fluid, and the image slowly comes up, you are either going to get hooked or not, okay? Something happens. And real quick, I took negatives from my mother's file, and the first time I ever saw my grandfather's face was in that solution.
Right.
I printed an image of my imagine that experience. Because I never met my grandfather.
Never seen him before. Yeah,
never seen him before. And he slowly came up in that fluid. But photographers, good photographers are dealing with all of those critical issues of composition and lighting that Chip's talking about. And yes, you can get there, but you have to be willing to learn.
But even back in the early 1900s into the middle of the century, one of the biggest conflicts was that photography is not really art because all you got to do is push a button.
That's the reason I said all that. Exactly. Yeah.
However, if you look at real fine art photography, people who have put their really just incredible experience and they get it in the frame, you can't. No one can just do that. It really takes a lot of effort.
Absolutely.
And there is. I don't consider myself a fine art photographer because I don't sell my stuff. Here's a photo, buy it kind of thing, except for food maybe. But there are some people out there that are absolutely brilliant. There are some people out there that want to be brilliant and aren't there yet.
Right.
And there are some people who call themselves fine art photographers, and I would say, yeah, okay.
If you say so.
That's right.
So to that end, by the way, we can also put on your resume you are a teacher of photography, correct?
I am. I have taught both at the Art Institute in Tampa as well as in the journalism program at University of South Florida in St. Pete. What a wonderful experience that was. Finally, because they're hungry. They're going to be journalists, and these days, it's one-man band stuff. It's you go, you do the story, you do the interview, you do the photography, and all that.
MMJ, I think they call those guys, multimedia journalists.
And you better bring that package back, and it better work. So they were really hungry to learn. Fantastic experience, just teaching as well as private. At the Florida Museum of Photographic Arts, I help establish their photography program there, and have moved on since then. But I love teaching. I love watching those light bulbs come on.
Sure.
And people says, "Oh, wow, look at that." And I'm like, "Yeah, you just did that because you took a little bit of knowledge and you put it into that instrument in your hand, and you're producing it." So I love it.
So you could have just been a photographer and good at it, and been a teacher and good at it, but now you've involved yourself in projects that sort of begin to take you into another level of teaching, which is to become a historian. And let's talk a little bit about that. And principally, we want to get to the Burgett brothers. And maybe before we do that, maybe you should explain to the audience who the Burgett brothers were.
Okay. The Burgett brothers were, it was a family of photographers who started in Tampa in the late 1800s. They originally opened a portrait studio in Ybor City. The father did. His name was Samuel. And then the sons, he had 5 sons, and they got involved in the business and eventually said, listen, portraits are great, but let's go into commercial photography, which, that lends itself to photojournalism and architectural photography, things like that. And they were masters of it. And there were some other competitors around. One of the operations was called Robertson and Fresh. But ever since early 1900s all the way through 1960s, they went regionally and sometimes statewide and put together this massive collection, this massive archive of wonderful photographs of people, places, things, events, elements, buildings. And we have this awesome visual history of Tampa, mostly located in the Hillsborough County Library, but some also at University of South Florida digital collection, and available to the public.
Excellent.
For those of us, Joe, that have been here for a minute or two, these are invaluable images because it gives us a look back in time. And for those that are just now getting here that might like to acquire some of that history and knowledge, even more invaluable. For us, it's waxing nostalgic because we can only imagine what our great-grandparents, grandparents, felt like in their youth, boots on the ground in those dusty old times of those pictures of Ybor City and certainly Davis Island in its inception. And now, we have them preserved digitally for all times. Chip is a big part of that. Andy Hughes, our dear friend Andy Hughes, also at USF is a big part of that. And I would be remiss if I didn't just read this email that we got just a little bit ago. Comes by way of Charles Parker from Palmetto. It says, glad Chip / Oscar Weiner is on today's show.
I wish I were.
The Oscar Mayer Weiner. And then that's what I truly want to be. And then it goes on to say, he says, he numbers in list of 1 through 4. It's chili, onions, wiener. I guess these are his favorite hot dogs at 4th of July. Onions, mustard, wiener. Or maybe these were nicknames for you.
Okay.
Or what they could have named you. Perhaps that's what he's referring to.
Okay.
Right? Kraft mustard wiener.
All right.
Right? Because these are all wiener.
Yeah.
Wiener-centric. And today, all above plus jalapenos. So jalapenos, and then he says, yum, happy 4th of July. Thanks, CP. Charles Parker from Palmetto. So I guess it's a good thing that your father and your mother, held back a little bit.
It's so funny
because they could have done anything with that Weiner name.
On my food blog, for whatever reason, I just did a 2-part series, and I called it Weiner on Wieners.
There you go.
And I went around the city to all these different places that served hot dogs. And, one of the things that's happening in the food world is that hot dogs are becoming a hot ticket item.
There's a renaissance there, right?
Yeah, they're making these craft hot dogs and adding all these sauces, and they were really, really good. But it's funny that, I love playing around like that, that I'll spend 3 weeks going around eating hot dogs and writing a food blog.
I think you have it figured out, Chip.
We were fortunate enough to be invited to a little bit of a gathering with Jeff Houck and Andy Hughes.
That's right.
And Sally and myself were invited to meet over at the Boozy Pig.
Yeah.
You want to talk about what he's doing over there? Tambuzo family.
Yeah, Tambuzo's over at the Boozy Pig. Awesome family. It's a butcher shop. It's also got a small restaurant there. They make and smoke their own hot dogs, and just really, really good stuff. The buns that they put them on are from, it's a place called Dojo, which is on Nebraska Avenue. Craft bread, just doing fantastic work. But lots of places are. They're just, it's really kind of getting its own feet. And I love seeing things like that come into the food flow, because I do so much blogging on the latest, greatest places and the food that's fantastic, but really put together by trained chefs. And now these are just hot dogs where people are doing different things too, and it just seems so all American and so simple. But
and here
really
we are on
good.
the 4th of
Great
July
stuff.
tomorrow.
And by the way, the Tambuzo family I know well, and they are an amazing family. We are just past the bottom of the hour, and we are here having a conversation with Chip Weiner, a man of many, many talents and skills. And
eclectic,
Mario?
I guess you could...
Eclectic. Certainly eclectic. No doubt about that.
Absolutely. So we've got a caller. Shall we go to our caller? I think he's called in previously. Let's see what Simon has to say. He just got in on the good timing here. Simon, are you on the phone there with us?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Good morning.
Oh, we got you. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Good. Hey, it's interesting. When I was in dental school, I had befriended a individual who owned an art gallery, and I had an opportunity to buy some Robert Mapplethorpe photography, but I couldn't use my student loans to do it, so therefore I'm kicking myself on a couple $100,000 sitting on now. You're talking about motorcyclists, and I was thinking we're so tribal, and we're tribal in thought. If you were a casting director of a movie, you'd never see a pink Harley Davidson. You see you'd never see a nun on a Harley Davidson. And we come up with these certain scenarios of branding. I thought, and I want to ask you as a photographer, if you had Annie Leibovitz, and whether you like Trump or don't like Trump, but just the image of the presidency, if Annie Leibovitz would have done a picture with Trump in a double-breasted white coat with medallions on it, and Melania comes out with a snake around her neck rather than the little poodle walking around on the grounds. We have such images of what people are supposed to be, and photography takes us somewhat on the fringes of that, which is good, which makes us think about what we really think we see. What are your thoughts on that?
Thanks, Simon. Thanks for your call.
I love your description. That is absolutely awesome. One of the cool things about photography is that it can be absolutely fantasy. If you want to be, I don't know, a warrior, we can put you in a warrior
or Dennis
suit.
Rodman with a pink boa.
There you go. Think of all the photographs that we've seen that make us smile, and it's not because it's a sense of reality, but because it's that piece of fantasy. I have taken on a project the last year or so, and shameless plug here, if you go to tbportraits.com, that's TampaBayPortraits.com, it is tbportraits.com, I have taken to going around and photographing all of the creatives that I met through my work at Creative Loafing. and taken them in their studios and been able to photograph them doing what they do with very creative lighting. And it's kind of sort of fantastic, at least some of the stories that those photographs tell. But without things like that, and even your description of that Trump man, let's make it happen, because I just think
Melania with a snake around her neck. So Chip, and something that pops into my mind: favorite image of the Burgert Brothers collection. And there's so many, thousands, tens of thousands. But I mean, is there a section of town? Is there a group of photographs that you really just go, okay, these define who the Burgert Brothers were, or even our Tampa history?
There are a lot of photographs of people. They photographed the Gasparilla celebration every year. And so you can look back and you can see some of those people. But the more historic things for me, because I kind of lean that way.
Buildings?
Does have to do with the architecture.
There you go.
Primarily in Ybor City.
Yeah.
That some of the buildings down there that are still standing have such a history and such fantastic stories. And if I can, another shameless plug here. Coming up in July, starting on the 18th, is the opening at the Florida Museum of Photographic Arts. They're doing an exhibit called Photo Ybor, and it's mostly my work of before and after photographs of this is what it looked like back in the day, and this is what it looks like now out of my books. But there's several other photographers taking part in that as well. And if you have any interest in Tampa history, any interest in Ybor history, it's going to be this wonderful photo exhibit of different things that happened in Ybor. And it's not just the buildings. Some of it has to do with people. If you think back in the 70s and 80s with the Writers and Artists Ball and Guavaween and El Goya and the castle and other things that have happened down there. There are some photographs of that, as well as I think on the 25th, I'm giving a gallery talk on some of that stuff. So come on down and at least look at the exhibit. Come to the gallery talk if you want, because a lot of that is the Burgert work, and it's just fantastic.
And while we're there, let's plug your books a little bit. Tell us a little bit about the book. You have a book or books about this subject.
On top of everything else, the man writes too.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, stop it.
Yeah.
I have it's really 3 books, but there are 2 that are the composites, and it's 950 pages of before and after, then and now photographs of Burgert Brothers.
And let me just real quick say, this book, for anyone out there who's listening, if you are interested in Tampa history, if you are interested in Ybor City's history, if you love photography, if you love architecture, this concept that Chip has put together of taking Burgert Brother photos and existing photos and then documenting that same site in its current state is an amazing experience. I'm just going to say that.
And I think my dear brother misspoke, Joe. Forgive me for correcting you, because you said for anyone out there listening. I believe that should have said for everyone out there listening, because it sounds like there might be only one person out there listening. For everyone out there listening, this man is an embarrassment of riches. You see what I'm saying? I mean, is there anything he can't do? Can you cook? Do you cook?
I can, I do, probably not.
I have and I will. I have and I will.
But you ought to try my hot dogs.
There you go.
Wieners again. So.
Wieners. Woo! We could do a whole other show on Wieners.
Come on.
So did we finish on the books? Do you want to say more about that?
Just the idea.
Say more.
If you're interested, you can go to, it's called oldtampaphotos.com. There's a lot of that work there from the Burgert Brothers. It's called Burgert Brothers Look Again. It's 2 volumes, but at oldtampaphotos.com, there's hundreds of images of before and after, not necessarily in the book that you can see absolutely free, but they're images that I think anyone who's been here for any time will recognize some of them. And I think the premise of so much of this work that I do, you've heard the line of every picture has a story. Well, as I was doing the research on these photographs, what I found out is every picture, there's a whole history behind it. And the ability to do the research and to find out the people, the places, the things, the underworld that was in this building or the thing that happened here is just fascinating. There's some really funny bits and pieces that happened around town. And so it's not just the photographs, it's also the written history that goes with it of 3.5 years worth of work of just nose to the grindstone, but still an absolute fascination with it. So,
well, you're talking you're in my wheelhouse now, because I became a resident lay historian in Ybor City, and I'm reading Dr. Moromino's books and Frank Lastra and all these people.
Yeah.
It's when I started to see the Burgett brothers photos that I became just entranced with how that history works. They did insurance work, where they shot various structures because of insurance. I don't know that it's the first, but an incredible image is a Burgett brother image of a car wreck in Ybor City at the intersection of the railroad tracks and 19th Street. And there's just something about that photo that just rings so true with me, because we've all seen car wrecks. Most of us probably have been in car wrecks. And when you see that, it's a connection. And they captured that.
With their big box camera.
Yeah, absolutely.
How did they find out about it before we had the internet and cell phones in our pockets? Let me read one more email here. It says, this is for you, Chip. It says, when did you and your photography work take on more of a historic bent? Did you have an interest in historical photos before 2020? And how was your interest in history informed? Has your interest in history informed your work? And this is, thanks, it says, from our dear friend, the aforementioned Andy Hughes.
Very good.
Thanks, Andy. The idea behind it was I clearly always, for a long time, had an interest in historical photos. And the 2017, I would say, is when the Burgett images began to come online through the library. When the pandemic rolled around, I was in the middle of several projects. It sort of shut me down, and then I started looking more at those. And again, I said, gosh, as I'm looking at some of these, I wonder what that looks like now. So I took a couple of them, primarily like behind Tampa General, looking at downtown Tampa. And there was one from the 1960s, and I'm like, I remember downtown looking like that. What does it look like through a camera lens now? And I went and took that picture, and it was amazing side by side. So I'm like, okay, maybe I've got a project here. And it just went on from there.
Maybe?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I started with
two books later
with another film camera, a medium format film camera, and started shooting some of that same thing the way the Burgetts did. And the story goes on and on, but the bottom line is, it eventually turned to digital, and
lovingly, painstakingly, you recreated the image down to the hour of the day. You figured out what time of day it was so that you could get the same angle from the sun.
Correct.
If he took it on an elevated platform, you raised your camera to kind of match the eye level.
Right.
Incredible due diligence and incredible work. I don't know how much the books cost, because I got mine from a friend, but the reality is they're a great friend, love him. The reality is the books are well worth it if you're a historian of any ilk.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
But you see, what happened there was that you answered your own. Artists are always doing this, which tells me even more so that you're an artist, in fact, is that if you are seducing yourself, you'll find your audience.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. And that's kind of like now. And now he's taking a picture of me as he's saying that.
Come on, there it is.
So that's, I find that fascinating. Now, earlier you mentioned something. Was it the Davis Island project, or did you say something about a
Gandy
the Gandy project? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I would love to talk about that. So as I'm wrapping up this Burgett project, I'm fishing around, and I went to USF Library, and thank you, Andy Hughes. I met with Andy, and I said, what have you got? He said, well, we got some more Burgetts. And I looked at those, and I'm like, I don't see most of these, but thank you. And then I saw some Tony Pizzo, Tampa historian extraordinaire, and they showed me some of his collection. Again, just wonderful. He said, have you seen any of the Gandy collection? Because they had, 100 images online. I'm like, yeah, kind of. He said, yeah, we've got 80 boxes of these things, but they were all negatives. And I said, well, let me take a look. And as I start going through that collection, I have my loop, I have my light table, so I can just look at negatives. You have to see in reverse when you're looking at negatives.
Right.
And I'm looking through them. I'm like, oh my goodness, this picks up where the Burgetts left off. The Gandy started in the mid-'60s. The Burgetts stopped in the mid-'60s, and the Gandys went right through early 2000s.
Almost as though it's meant to be.
As though it was meant to be.
Yeah.
And so as I'm looking through these, I found my family members, my fraternity brothers, companies that I'd heard of long ago. And I said, what's happening with these? And they're like, well, it's sort of on the radar for us to digitize at some point, maybe in the next 5 or 6 years. I'm like, nope, because I'm looking at these negatives and they're starting to deteriorate.
Diminish,
because that's what happens with that film.
Right.
And so I said, how do we make this happen? And so we put this program together, and we're able to come up with the money to get these things digitized. And originally thought there was going to be 60 to 80,000 images from the Gandhi collection. Turns out there are 125,000 images from the Gandhi collection. They are now all digitized in USF library. And digital collection is churning away at adding the metadata and adding the keywords and things like that. And all of those images are going to be available to the public.
Here.
Probably towards the end of this year. And I'm going to tell you, if you've been in Tampa for any time and you look through those images, you will see something And I'm talking about images speaking of Ybor City in the 80s. When it was not such a pretty place to see.
Right.
And there will be some of those, by the way, at the museum exhibit. But there's this whole cross-section of buildings and stuff in Ybor City. And so much more. The opening of Ybor Square back when, it was opening and Rough Riders Restaurant and things like that. Mm-hmm. So fantastic collection. And that's coming online. And we're going to be talking a heck of a lot more of that probably towards the end of the year. Because, again, the public has such a great interest in all of that stuff. So, yeah.
I've got a fabulous email that I need to read here.
Love fabulous.
Yes, we do. Fabulous with a capital F. It says, hello there, exclamation point. I'm really enjoying your program today. It's fascinating, another exclamation point. Please repeat your guest's name. Thank you. This is from Margaret Keller. St. Pete is in the house, and she's part of our circle of friends. What was your name again, sir?
Hey, Margaret. Good to meet you. I am Chip Eugene Dale Weiner.
There it is. And that is a mouthful.
Otherwise known as Chip Weiner.
Chip Weiner.
Yes.
That's correct.
Intrepid photographer, motorcycle enthusiast, clinical psychologist. Apparently, he does some telecommunicating from, I don't know what we do with that. But Chip is... he's a invaluable resource here for those of us in the history preservation community as well. And it must have been like one of those moments where you had to pinch yourself when you finally realized what you had with the Gandhi collection, because then you put it all together on a timeline, and you're spanning almost 100 years of photographs. I get chill bumps just thinking about it.
And the truth of the matter is, I haven't even really seen it all. They sent me that little teaser platter of where this is what we're going to serve.
Speaking of food, as a food enthusiast would, right. A amuse-bouche, if you will.
Just in the, 80, 100 images they sent me, I'm like, I know this person. That was, I won't go into great detail. His name was Bernie Little. He owned the Miss Budweiser hydroplane. He was,
of course,
he was big
champion.
Deal in Tampa, right? He opened a Budweiser distributorship over in Lakeland. He sponsored this thing at Peter Overnight Airport because he was also into aviation. Mm-hmm. And there's a picture of young Dick Greco sitting in one of his planes.
Wow.
And so that's just, hey, we got these digitized. Here's how we're doing it. Does everything look all right? And I'm like, send me more.
Yeah.
And I can't wait. I just can't wait because I haven't seen,
Might be another book. Enough material.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but thanks for that question, Margaret.
Of course. Chip, what have we not touched on today that's something that you would like to express to the listening audience that, is something that maybe around the next corner for you? Or, do you want to give a shout out to your better half? I mean, I don't know. I'm just saying, we've met her. She's wonderful. She's your partner in this journey.
Let me plug her for a second because what a wonderful woman she is.
There you go.
She has also written a book. She is also a therapist, and she deals a lot with trauma. Mm-hmm. And she wrote a book that's the title is What Can I Say? And it's specifically related to people who have experienced a loss. And hers is available on Amazon, so let me plug that there. And Oxford Exchange, by the way. And I think she's going into Barnes & Noble. Anyway, it's a small book. So you experience a loss in your life, or a friend of yours experiences a loss in their life. And they've had this death, and you're trying to be supportive. Well, what do you say to that person? Mm-hmm. It's not that bad, or, they're in the hands of God now. And all of that can be comforting. But it's this beautiful, brief look at, here's some ideas. And specifically, here's what not to say.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, I know where you're coming from because my father died as well. No, you don't have a clue.
Yeah.
Right. Because your experience is different from mine.
Right.
So thanks for letting me say that, because she is a wonderful woman. And
so is her pen name Mrs. Chip Weiner? I mean, is she,
God, don't
do we
say
look
that.
Do we look for her?
What is the author's name?
Catherine Hodge is her name.
Excellent.
And superior therapist as well, and great piece of practical information.
So is there any arguing going on in the Weiner household? I mean, because we're both clinical therapists. I mean, before we even get into the argument, we've already analyzed why we're having the argument.
A perfectly healthy.
There's no argument.
Everything is completely open, and life is good for them.
But with this gentleman who's obviously a sentient being sitting here in the studio with us, and obviously all senses full on all the time, I want to know what it was like when he took the master class over there at the Commodore Theater to do improv comedy, because I don't see this man improvising on anything. I see him doing everything thought out, everything is calculated, everything is pre-measured.
Interesting.
Talk to me about that, Chip.
The Commodore Comedy Theater down on Nebraska.
And we love the Commodore.
What a great place that is.
Yeah, it's a great place.
Yeah. So I saw this class. I got involved in this Veterans Arts Council at the Straz, and actually did some performing there with Fred Johnson, who is a wonderful singer, and we could do a whole show on him, and maybe you should. What a great man. Mm-hmm. Kind of piqued my interest in being on stage, and I saw this thing where the Commodore was offering these improv classes. And so I went and took it, and it was wonderful. But you know what I took away from it? Is that there's philosophy everywhere. And I've used it actually with couples before, because one of the first things they teach you in improv is if someone gets up there and says the sky is red, you don't say, oh, no, it's not, it's blue. You use this phrase, yes, and.
Right.
Yes, and sometimes it's purple or something. In other words, you capture the agreement first, and you further the dialogue versus putting an interruption in there. So not only did I get to go on stage and have fun cutting up with a wonderful group in this class, and we had a ball doing it, I also was able to add to my ideas about philosophy of how do we get through life. If we were all able to say, if someone says something completely counter to our beliefs, can we accept the fact that that's the way they see the world, which is the first premise of marriage counseling? You got to understand there are two viewpoints sitting in this room.
Several lenses.
Yeah, that's right. And can you try to understand where they're coming from, use and enhance your emotional intelligence by understanding where other people are coming from first, and then if there's room in the room to add your ideas, then do so. But that yes and phrase, when whatever she says, I hate it when we do the things for the holidays. All right, well, help me understand what you hate, and can we also think about it? So it was wonderful in several ways doing that thing at the Commodore.
The takeaway for me is that I need to start employing yes and not interrupting and truncating what people say. So when you're talking from now on, Joe, and I have something to say, it's going to be yes and let me say what I have to say.
Perfect.
And
yes and
it's and the other thing that I was going to say to Chip, which is very poignant, just flew out of my head. Oh my! It has to do with where were we at, Joe? Where were we?
What point give you a moment. Mario and I both have been there on stage at the Commodore, and so we know that part of the experience.
All right.
And I saw photos of your performance, and you look like you were having a ball.
What a blast!
Yeah.
And so they're open to everybody, by the way. So if you want to,
so what you're saying is we should all experience that to broaden and expand our horizons.
Yes, and look at every issue in your life as an opportunity to learn and to pick up a piece of philosophy that is affirmative to your life instead of trying to find the argument.
That's right.
So it flew back into my head as quickly as it flew out of my head.
I knew it would.
So thank you for giving me that space to go find it again. So as my cousin Manny Mendoza once so poignantly told me, so accurately told me, because I was having a lively discussion with him about today's political climate and how can they just be that way? How can they just be happening? Why are they so different? And he tells me, says, man, sometimes you just got to look out a different window. Because
there we go.
They see, if this is the window you're looking out of and you see that, they may see something completely different. So it's all about personal frame of reference.
I become much more empathetic as I get older, and I realize much more what it must be like to be in that man's shoes than I ever have in my life. And it's a tool. It's a good tool to have.
Awesome.
Now, I have a question for
we
Chip
got 30. We got less than 30 seconds.
Okay, if you could go back in time here in Tampa at any moment, any place, where would you go?
Oh boy, I can't answer that. It's just
we don't have time.
Too many cool places.
Too many cool places.
Who would you sit and have lunch with? Okay, so we'll leave it right there because we've got to get out of here in time. I just want to say thank you so much, my
brother.
What
an honor, you guys. Thank you so much
for being here with us. We love having you on the show.
Great, thank you.
The audience loves hearing you, and we want to bring you back again.
Let's do it.
Maybe next time we'll do some counseling. Listen, on behalf of everybody that puts this show together, especially our producer, Miss Jessica, who's working our board, thanks for listening. Happy 4th of July. We'll see you next week, everybody. You've been listening to WMNF Radio.